Hello, everyone, and welcome to Maine Audubon's legislative preview for the 132nd Maine legislature starting here in 2025. We are on with our policy experts, our advocacy squadron here to talk you through all the bills that we have prioritized among the thousands that are on the table this legislative session in Augusta. I am joined by two of the best in the biz. Let me start with our advocacy director, Chess Gundrum. Hello, Chess.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for the intro and not biased support, Shirley. Nick, thanks.
I'm biased. I'm over not being biased. I'm over it. Also, to my left, I don't know where she is on your screen, are relatively new to the squad. Welcome, policy advocate Anya Wright. Hello, Anya.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Nick. Yeah, and can't see you all virtually, but nice to be in community with you all today, and really excited to chat with you all about our priorities.
Yes. Their two smiling faces belie the fact that they are working as hard as anyone has ever worked right now in the halls of Augusta. Well, maybe not right now, but these weeks and days and nights and weekends, playing defense, playing offense, making sure that Maine's habitat and wildlife is protected to the extent possible. And they're like, this is probably the calmest moment they've had in 2 weeks, being able to sit here and just talk to some folks. So don't let their calm demeanors fool you. They are in the thick of it right now. But we'd love to talk to you about what that means. So without further ado, there's no ado. Please put questions and answers down in the Q&A box. We'll get to them at the end. The way we do these webinars, we can't see or hear you. I can see your names on the side. So sorry about that. Maybe we'll change that in the future. But that's the way it is right now. It is being recorded. It'll be on YouTube later. And let me just turn things over to Chess to get things started.
Awesome. Thank you, Nick, for a lively introduction, as always. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Oops. Let's see. All right. Are you all seeing this?
Looks great.
Okay, great. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you again. Thank you all for being here to hear a little bit about what Maine Audubon's advocacy department is working on up in Augusta right now. And what we're going to do is give you a preview, as Nick said. We'll give you a little bit of a background for those of you, maybe new folks who have just encountered Maine Audubon. Welcome, if so, to ground you in our organization and the work that our department does. And then we'll swing it over up to Augusta and let you know about a dozen or so bills and initiatives that we are working to advance or to stop, all to help support the conservation of wildlife and habitat in Maine. So here we go. Maine Audubon's mission, as Nick said, is to conserve Maine wildlife and habitat. And we do that by engaging people in education, conservation, and action. And that's where the advocacy department comes in. Action. Our department, all of the positions, the policy positions we take are guided by science. They are science-based policy decisions. We have a team of dedicated conservationists, ecologists, and environmental educators that help inform what we do and where up in Augusta and beyond. We work at all levels of government. We work at the local level. Nick here tabling for Bird Safe Maine up in Portland. We work at the state level. Again, that's the focus of today's conversation, and that's where the majority of our advocacy department's work has been recently. But we also work at the federal level, which is certainly of interest always, but especially right now. And so we might chat a little bit toward the end, and surely there could be questions about our federal work. But you all signed up to hear what we're working on at the state level, so we're going to focus there. But more than happy to discuss the work that we're doing to help safeguard some of our country's landmark wildlife legislation, like the Endangered Species Act. for example. So more on that potentially later, but let's keep moving. Ooh, going the wrong way. There we go. Our department has a variety of focus areas, again, guided by the work that our conservation and our education departments at the organization are doing. And those are quite far reaching because wildlife and habitat are everywhere, which means that as much as we possibly can, we need to be everywhere too. So we focus on climate change and renewable energy legislation and policies, habitat connectivity, land conservation, what's happening up at the North Woods in Maine, plastics, clean water, environmental justice, environmental education, and of course, rare, threatened, and endangered species policies. So the first session of Maine's 132nd legislature has begun, started in early January, and adjournment is set for the sort of middle to end of June. We know that, as Nick shared at the top, that around 2,200 bills have been submitted by individual legislators and by agencies. And we're looking through every single one because, as I shared, right, wildlife and habitat are everywhere. And sometimes a bill that might not look like it's directly tied to a wildlife issue really is or really could be. So that's why Anya and I take the time to look through every single bill that gets printed every session. And we'll be tracking hundreds of those after we take a first pass through them, hundreds of those bills, and likely testifying on 50 or likely more than 50. I believe in the 131st legislature, we testified on almost 60 bills, and I anticipate we'll be right around there, if not more, this session. All right, so Anya and I are going to go back and forth here and talk about some of our priorities, and we're just going to give you a high level overview of what's going on. And so you know too, many of the bills we'll talk about, we've been working with environmental and wildlife champions in the legislature to help submit these bills. Some of them we're reacting to, but some of them we've been able to develop in-house and work with those champions to get them forwarded, and some are from agencies, and so it's a bit of a mix. And then there's also some that we're going to be responding to and trying to we'll be opposing, so we'll talk about some of those. Okay, but the first bill of the dozen or so we'll discuss today is legislation to expand protections to vernal pools. So Maine is got a lot of wetlands. It's a very, and vernal pools are a very important part of that. And significant vernal pools, so those pools that meet specific qualifications that make them extra special, extra unique on the landscape, are afforded special protections. However, we've identified opportunities to expand those protections to bring them on the same sort of on par with other significant wildlife habitat types. So one of the ideas we have is to actually protect vernal pools, significant vernal pools, with 100-foot no disturbance buffer around those vernal pool depressions. And that will make it so that any sort of development pressure can't get right up to the water's edge, because ultimately that will lead to the demise and degradation of that habitat. And we don't want that. And right now that's what we're allowed to do under existing statutes. So there's that component to it, as well as we're also taking a look at how we can protect the terrestrial habitat. So what's around that vernal pool as well, because we know that that space is just as, if not potentially more important at certain points during the life cycles of various species. And we see opportunities to close some loopholes and make it so that the terrestrial, that critical habitat around the pools is protected as well. So we appreciate Representative Sally Clucci's working with us on this, and she's an environmental and wildlife champion, and we're working closely to help identify or how we get this across the finish line. All right, let's keep moving. Another initiative we're working on is to fund the Land for Maine's Future program, or LMF. I'm sure, hopefully, many of you have heard of LMF as it's Maine's most successful land conservation program. This program, it's housed within the Department of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry. It has been around for almost 40 years, and it's responsible for the conservation of more than 600,000 acres in Maine across all 16 counties. And why this program is so successful is because it does not focus on any one type of land. It helps to conserve forests, working waterfronts, farmland, conservation lands of importance to wildlife, and that's where Maine Audubon comes in, among others. And it has often received bipartisan support. Again, another reason why it has been so successful. However, it's almost out of funds. And so municipalities, land trusts, others who want to apply to get this money from the state, they can't, because there's really nothing left at this stage. And it is matching funds too. So it's not just straight from the fund, which is good. It's a good system in that way. However, we do not have a long-term or secure funding mechanism for LMF yet. And while that's something that many partners beyond Maine Audubon, we're working collaboratively on this, are looking to achieve, we know that we need to get money into this fund now in order to meet our conservation goals, as Maine has set a pretty high bar in terms of land conservation to conserve 30% of land in our state by 2030. And in order to reach that goal, we absolutely must fund LMF right now. So we are grateful to a variety of legislators, one of which Senator Black, who's put in a bill to get an LMF bond across the finish line here, or to also allocate money from the budget for LMF. And there are other unique ideas being worked out, and we appreciate Senator Peirce's work on this as well, as she's dedicated to this program. So we've got a lot of folks who are interested in getting money into this pot, and we'll see which is the most viable toward the throughout the session, but we're working hard on that. Okay, another one from me, and then I think we'll flip it over to Anya. We're also working with partners to help protect the last of Maine's oldest forests. So we know that 3% of Maine's North Woods can be considered old growth, and new mapping initiatives have allowed us to identify where those stands are with better accuracy than ever. And we know that biologically mature forests, so those are forests that, you know, more than 180 or so years old, they harbor more biodiversity than other forest types. They've got mosses and lichens and beetles and fungi and vernal plants that are in those places that do not exist elsewhere. So it's an incredibly important resource to help protect biodiversity in Maine. And it's a resource, these are places that we know we do not have a lot of. And many of these places exist on private land, which is not surprising, right? As most of Maine is privately owned. So there's an effort to figure out, okay, how do we get the right people into the right rooms to figure out how we can collaboratively and responsibly protect the last of these forest types. So there's a lot more to come with this one, and this one, again, we're grateful to there's a variety of partners working on this one, but Maine Audubon is following closely and doing what we can to help advance legislation to protect our oldest forests. And now, Anya, you're up.
All right, thank you, Chess. So one of our other priorities is creating the Green Schools Network. This is a bill that we're working on in coalition with the Nature-Based Education Consortium and their Climate Education Policy Working Group. So we know that quality environmental education is really paramount in our fight against climate change, creating stewards for our environment through effective education of our next generation is really a climate strategy. And part of realizing that is getting better support for teachers, students, and infrastructure to really streamline that process. So by creating the Green Schools Network, which will bring together folks from state agencies, Wabanaki leaders, educators, students, and nonprofit organizations. This bill will aim to support professional development and create some common resources and trainings and metrics to support educators, and also increase the number of educators in the state who can provide green schools training. And so, yeah, this is really a bill that's essential to our statewide environmental literacy, and also giving teachers the support that they need in an otherwise, already overburdened space that is our education space right now. Chess, I think I'll pass it back to you for our next one.
Great, thanks, Anya. So another topic, one that if for those of you that were tracking the work that we were doing in the 131st legislature, has come back around. So we are also working with lake partners across the state to address the spread of aquatic invasive species. And we were able to accomplish quite a bit last session to help protect lakes and water quality for our lakes and ponds. But there's still some extra work to do. So we are looking to help secure funding to support some more of the work that's happening on the ground to address invasive aquatic species and their spread. We appreciate Rep. Briggio has put in legislation to help fund some of this work. And we're also looking to advance legislation to help increase the coordination between natural resource agencies like Department of Environmental Protection and Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, and with municipalities and landowners and others who utilize lakes and ponds, so that if there is an outbreak, what do we do about it? What's the next sort of series of steps that we take to help address outbreaks? So thank you to Rep. Hassenfuss for putting in legislation to help address the coordination piece. So plenty of work for lakes and ponds there to come. And back to you, Anya.
Thanks, Chess. So this bill is around strengthening protections against neonicotinoids. So neonicotinoids, or neonics, as they're more commonly referred to, are a class of insecticides that are incredibly toxic and are harmful to wildlife, to people. And Maine already has some strong neonicotinoid legislation that bans the use of certain types of these pesticides. But we're looking to strengthen that this session. Neonicotinoids, if we're looking specifically at birds, they've been tied to weight loss in birds, decreased brood sizes, impaired reproduction, impaired motor control, death. They're really these terrible pesticides. And so the bill that we're working on this session is based off of legislation that was just passed in Vermont that looks at banning the agricultural use of neonicotinoid coated seeds, which birds can eat, but then also if insects come in contact with these seeds and then birds eat those insects, then they're also exposed to the toxins. So this bill will do that, as well as broaden the class of neonicotinoids that are currently not allowed in Maine. And Chess, back to you.
Excellent, thank you. Oh no, back to you.
No, back to me. All right, so this is a bill that we've been working on for Chess, you may have to remind me, four sessions now, three sessions. And this is a priority of Maine Audubon as a part of the broader Wabanaki Alliance, which is a group of, I should have this number off the top of my head, but over 100 organizations from across the state of Maine who have come together to support priorities of the Wabanaki nations. And so these slate of bills, we're expecting a couple of them. And I did also see a question in the chat about LD numbers, which that refers to the legislative document number of the bill once it's printed. We do have LD numbers for a few of these bills, but not all of them. And as Jess said at the beginning, about 500 of the 2,200 bills have been printed thus far. We do have a legislative tracker on our website, which we'll be updating periodically with some of these LD numbers as they get printed. Just an aside there, but back to the Wabanaki self-determination bill or bills. So for over 40 years, since the 1980s, Maine has denied the Wabanaki Nation's inherent tribal sovereignty within the state. So that's excluding the Holton Band of Maliseet Indians, the Micmac Nation, Passamaquoddy Tribe, Penobscot Nation, from any rights and protections guaranteed by federal Indian law. And this has resulted in decades of economic and social barriers for the Wabanaki people and surrounding communities. And at Maine Audubon, we know when the Wabanaki thrive, we all thrive. And the Wabanaki are incredible stewards of the lands in what we now call Maine. It says on the slide more than 300, not 100. So this continues to be a priority of ours in this session. And following up on this one, a sub goal of our work with the Wabanaki is to bolster Wabanaki studies in schools. So while terms like environmental literacy and sustainability, climatology are much newer, those ways of knowing have been here as long as people have. And too many students have not had the opportunity to learn about Wabanaki history or these essential concepts. And the Wabanaki Studies Commission should be reestablished to address these current barriers and challenges to fully implementing a law that was passed in 2001, the Wabanaki Studies Law, to provide dependable and expert guidance on what resources exist to teach Wabanaki studies in Maine schools. And for the past 5 years or so, or 6 years or so, Maine Audubon has worked closely with Wabanaki experts and advisors to integrate Indigenous knowledge into environmental education programs for people of all ages, especially with youth. We've collaborated in particular with the Portland Public Schools to help integrate Wabanaki studies, particularly with experiential fieldwork, and at a landscape scale for all K through 12 students in Maine's largest and most diverse school district. And so by blending Indigenous knowledge with Western sciences of biology, botany, and ornithology and others, these programs focused on a broadband notion of ecology that's more inclusive of people and our communities. And studying Wabanaki culture helps connect Maine kids to this place. So we're looking forward to continuing to be a champion on this bill and support it as it goes through. Jess, I'll pass it back to you to talk about land use.
Oh, thanks, Anya. Helpful overview. And I am seeing questions pop up in the chat, and we'll address them toward the end. But with dueling screens, I don't want to lose my place here, but great questions coming in. So thank you. Another huge sector of our work that has always been something Maine Audubon has worked on, but increasingly so in recent years, is about responsible land use planning. Habitat loss coupled with fragmentation is still the #1 threat to wildlife in Maine. And we know that growth and conservation can exist, and they have to. And that's where Maine Audubon has come into these spaces to make sure that as we are advancing our goals to increase housing and housing opportunity and options for people in Maine currently or that will be here soon, we have to do so in a smart way. We have to do so in a way that continues to conserve wildlife and habitat and protect those places in our biodiversity, and the things that make Maine Maine. So we're working on a variety of different bills in the land use planning space, some good and some bad, quite honestly, or that need Maine Audubon support to make them better. One area that of this space, one piece of legislation that we're working quite a bit on is updating what's called the growth management law. And that's the statute that directs land use management and comprehensive planning processes that's used by municipalities in Maine. And that law is in need of a decent refresh. It has, it's decades old and it needs to be updated to address the needs of both human and wildlife communities in Maine. So we're working with our partners in the smart growth space to help update that legislation and give towns the technical assistance and support that they need to make decisions that they want to for their towns and their communities. And amongst that as well, any opportunity we can, we support embracing and spreading, beginning with habitat assistance to towns. So this is a program that is run within the Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife that helps Maine towns and landowners and land trusts build habitat conservation into their long-term planning efforts. So any opportunity, again, where we can bolster this program and get this assistance to towns, whether it's through, or we will. So that's two large areas where we are working. Another sort of related space is we're working on legislation to update the open space tax credit. And you might recall, again, if you were tracking our work in the 131st, we tried to do this a couple years ago, and it unfortunately didn't make it across the finish line last time around. And so we're working with partners to help get it across the finish line this time. So open space plays a key role in recognizing and incentivizing private landowners to manage their land to provide public benefit. So the law allows town assessors to actually lower property taxes for a landowner in exchange for them maintaining or enhancing open space that conserves woods, waters, and wildlife, and that's where we come in, and also other types of recreation or hunting and fishing and what have you. But the law is very much in need of a refresh so that we can support private landowners in better conserving generally a more complex set of open space values across the state. So in the wonky world of tax statutes here, but it's a very important and necessary update to this current use taxation program. And we thank Representative Dan Sayer for taking this on this legislative session. All right.
Great. This one's me. So Maine Audubon is a huge supporter of renewable energy development and thoughtful renewable energy development. As we know that the biggest and most pervasive threat to Maine's wildlife and habitat is climate change driven by carbon pollution. And one of the big pieces of the pie as we look at solutions is meeting Maine's clean energy goals. And so this goal really has like a subset of a couple bills we'll be looking at this session. One of which is looking at codifying Maine's goal of 100% clean energy by 2040 into Maine law and Maine statute as a way to really future-proof these goals against future administrations around any federal setbacks. to make sure that this goal is something that we're planning for and going to reach. And then we'll also be playing a lot of defense this session on renewable energy. We're seeing a lot of attacks, at all levels of government to clean energy programs and clean energy technology. So we'll be ensuring that we're keeping the programs that work and keeping out, non-renewable and fossil fuel derived energy as we continue to push for this broader goal of 100% clean energy.
Excellent. Thanks, Anya. All right, another effort we're working on is supporting stream smart efforts across the state. So towns across Maine have and are currently and will replace undersized or decaying culverts. But we know that larger crossings that permit fish and wildlife movement to move safely underneath are actually better for people and better for wildlife. And this is not a new problem. Maine Audubon's been aware of this issue for many years. And in 2011, I believe, we joined a large group of state and federal and other nonprofit partners to launch this program called Stream Smart, which uses science-based solutions to protect road infrastructure and, again, enhance fish and wildlife passage all at the same time. We are supporting legislation to help fund this program so that we can get the technical support to road professionals and others who are in charge of upgrading this infrastructure. And of course, coming off of the extremely destructive storms, those winter storms that took place in 2024, this issue became apparent all across the state. So Stream Smart solutions let streams act like streams, and they last longer than those undersized crossings. They reduce the risk of road washouts, and in the long run, they actually save us money. So if we invest now, we'll be saving money in the long term. And that's what we're trying to do. So we're grateful to Department of Transportation in collaboration with Department of Environmental Protection historically that are taking on this Stream Smart work. And we want to make sure that they have the funding and the resources that they need to in order to run this program, which again benefits people and wildlife. All right, back to you, Anya.
Thanks, Chess. Last one for me, and then I think we have one or two more, and then excited to take questions from you all. We're going to be playing some defense on plastic pollution this session, specifically around plastic bags. So right now, Maine has some pretty strong legislation or laws around limiting the use of plastic bags and having a plastic bag ban. And this is a great step in reducing plastic pollution, which we know causes significant harms to wildlife. I think, a great but incredibly sad example is in seabirds, over 90% of seabirds are estimated to have plastic in their stomachs, compared to fewer than 5% in the 1960s. And so this is a really prevalent issue that we're working to figure out, more creative ways to limit. And keeping the laws that we already have is certainly a good step to doing that. Another way that we're hoping to potentially strengthen this session is to remove some of the loopholes that are currently allowed within the current law. If any of you shop at Shaw's, they have those reusable plastic bags that they give out at the registers that because they're thicker than the more traditional non-reusable plastic bags, they're still allowed to give them out. And so we're looking to strengthen the ban to include bags like that. And these are not the reusable bags that you would bring from home, or the really thicker reusable bags, but just, yeah, loopholes to the current law. So that's going to be another one of our priorities this session. And Chess, I'll pass it back to you for, I think, our last one.
I think it's our last one too. Which is curbing artificial light pollution, which is becoming a critical issue for people and wildlife around the globe. And we are seeing a growing appreciation of dark skies as a unique natural resource. And I could see all of you. I'm sure you'd be raising your hands right now if I asked, did you see the eclipse last April? Have you seen the other incredible celestial events, like the Northern Lights displays we've seen twice now in 2024? This is a picture I took just outside of where I live in southern Maine, outside of Portland. Incredible moments where we're all coming together and seeing what an unbelievable resource we have in the state, and that is special. That is something that so many other places across this country, across the country, surely do not have. And we have to protect it. So both Katahdin Woods and Waters National Monument and then Appalachian Mountain Club's property in Piscataquis County have been recognized by Dark Sky International for the quality of their night skies. We know that artificial lighting produces a broad range of ecological impacts. So that wasteful and unnecessary light produces demonstrable effects on the behavior and population ecology of wildlife. So just like us, animals and planets live by a rhythm that's attuned to that 24-hour lightness and darkness cycle. So similar to what we experience when our circadian rhythms get disrupted, you change time zones or during daylight savings time. Wildlife experience that's a very similar sort of disorientation of time when there's too much artificial light at night. And that disorientation can have population level impacts and is very easily avoided. So one example, right? We know a lot of birds migrate or hunt at night, and that makes them extremely vulnerable to bright lights in areas that are naturally dark. So this is an issue that brings people and wildlife together, and also economy. So we can save money if we embrace dark sky compliance, if we shield our lights, if we put our lights on timers, if we use warmer lights versus colder lights. There are a variety of things that can be done to make the places where we live darker, and that's better for people, it's better for wildlife, it's better for helping us reach our clean energy goals and saving money. So this legislation, we're working in partnership with the Appalachian Mountain Club, that would require public buildings in Maine to take steps to reduce that artificial light pollution. So whether it's a new building coming up or renovations to an existing building, that shielded light, the warmer lights, lights on timers, all those things that exist already, we know we can do and we should, to help protect this incredible resource. Many thanks to Representative Lori Osher, who's a dark sky champion, who's bringing this legislation forward this session with us. So I believe that's it for now. And we'll take questions, but I'm just going to throw this up now. And Nick, maybe you can talk a little bit about our stay connected pieces here.
Sure. I also feel the need to touch on on federal stuff quickly. This is a state legislation based presentation right now. Chess and Anya are hard at work in the halls of Augusta because that's the session going on. But there is a lot of activity happening in DC too, you may have heard. I just want folks to know that we are also hard at work on federal issues. Our federal delegation is an important one. Some of the committees and roles that our delegation has make them key people. And we've been hearing from a lot of folks, both in the state and federal partners, who want assistance reaching out to folks in our delegation to try to encourage them to do the right thing. So we've met recently with all members of our delegation in Maine to share our priorities with them and let them know that we are a resource for wildlife and habitat issues in Maine. We have really good relationships with our federal delegation. We've been around as Maine Audubon a long time. We have great name recognition. They know who we are. We've done events with all of them over the years. And so we are in communication with them. Just very briefly, when we talk with them about our federal priorities, we talk about a couple things. Endangered Species Act. We do a lot of work here in Maine with the Endangered Species Act. We're really proud of the work we've done to implement the law, especially in regards to piping plovers, in a way that works for everyone. And so we talk to them about that. Migratory Bird Treaty Act is one of the oldest environmental laws in the country, protects migratory birds going back and forth to their areas. It was something that previous administrations had worked to weaken. This current administration has pledged to weaken it. We want to try to step in and stop that. Clean Water Act, Land Water Conservation Fund, National Wildlife Refuge System, offshore wind in regards to Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, some dam relicensing issues, and some individual bills such as the misguided, we feel, Fix Our Forests Act, and the positive Recovering America's Wildlife Act. So I just want to let folks know that while this is a state-based project, we are in constant touch with our federal delegation and are working on that end too. So on all fronts, state and federal, we want to stay in touch with you. If you are here right now, you probably are part of our action alert system, and I thank you for that. But if you're not, please join us. This is the best way to stay in touch. And honestly, Chess and Ani will tell you, the best way to get a state legislator to do something is to write to them. They don't have huge districts, right? So they may only be hearing from one or two people on any particular issue. And if they're not hearing from you, they don't know that it's an important thing, right? So sign up for our action alerts. Make sure you put your address and zip code in there, because that's how we can identify, we can tell which of our folks is in which person's district, right? That's really important. So, and I know I say this all the time, but when those emails come through that says send a note to your legislator or sign this thing, it really helps to do that. It sounds crazy, but it really does help to do that, especially in Maine, where they're only hearing from a few people. We're on social media, and Chess and Anya do a great job of sort of keeping folks up to date with the latest when they're in some crucial hearing or they're doing something cool. So follow along there, and then email us anytime, advocacy@Maine Audubon. All right. Thank you. We are doing good on time, and I want to get to a few questions. I want to start first with a question from our good friend Catherine on the vernal pool question. What is the current no disturbance buffer? What's the situation now, Chess or on?
Great question, Catherine. So there is no buffer. There is no no disturbance buffer right now, and that's exactly what we're trying to change. So if someone is working with DEP to build a home, for example, and they know that there's a significant vernal pool on their property, you are allowed, if you can't maneuver your property plans otherwise, you are allowed to take up to 25% of the buffer right from the vernal pool depression up 250 feet out from that significant vernal pool. You're allowed to take 25% of that swath of that area from the pool to 250 feet out. What we're looking to do is to make it so that you can't go all the way up to the water. So we want to make it so that for 100 feet out, you can't build your home. You can still utilize that terrestrial habitat as you need to if you can't modify your plans in consultation with DEP and other consultants shortly. But we should not be building right up to that water. It's going to eventually lead to the loss or significant degradation to that vernal pool. So that's where we're at with that one. Hopefully that info is helpful.
That's great. Thanks, Jess. Another question here from our great friend Barbara Vickery. I'll just read the whole thing. We know this legislative session is facing seriously tough fiscal constraints. Many of the priorities you have highlighted will have fiscal notes attached. Besides the possibility of a bond for LMF, there are other ways being considered to get programs the funds they need so they don't die on the budget table.
Oh, that is, Barbara, I'm sure you know thoroughly that is the struggle every single time we want to do any sort of thing, any new thing, any initiative, any big changes that require funding. It's always a struggle. And I'd say about half of the things that we threw your way today, I don't anticipate fiscal notes, or the fiscal notes will be so moderate or basically absorbed by agencies that will be all right. But you're completely accurate that some of them it'll be a hurdle to try and advocate that they get the appropriations that they need. And so the best thing we can do is try and get them into the budget. So that has been a new focus for us and for other environmental groups. New territory is following the budget process. So many of us have been just focused on the actual policy making and getting our bill passed by the legislature. But that's not even half of it, right? If it requires funding. So working beforehand with appropriators to help elevate the issue and try and get it tucked under the budget, or looking for special revenue accounts beyond the general fund. There are avenues for us to try and fund our work outside of asking for general fund money, but it's hard, and many priorities do not make it across the finish line because they do require money. So we're trying our best to use with the tools that we have, with the sort of forecast that we have at this moment in time. But a lot of it is, again, working with those appropriators, and then also working with agencies to figure out who they have in-house who could maybe take on different elements of the work that we might be suggesting require more attention. Anya, did you have something else you wanted to add?
No, I think that's a great overview, Chess. And I just add, in a time of uncertainty at the state level with the budget, and then I also saw a question that I think we'll get to in a bit about, federal uncertainty with funding. I think it's just another reason why your action as viewers today is extra important. There are a ton of competing asks for budget allocation, in Augusta and beyond. And so the more that we're able to uplift these, not just Chess and I in the State House saying that they're important to Maine Audubon, but that they're important to you all as constituents is huge.
Thank you, Jess and Anya. I wanted to give a shout out to our great friend Juanita for her comment about thanking you all for taking on dark sky work. Yeah, it's really important to protect these beautiful skies, and if we don't do it, they're going to be gone. So agree with you, Juanita. Couple questions here about coyotes. What's going on with coyotes, Jess?
Great questions. So over the years, there have been efforts to explore how coyotes are managed in Maine. And while historically Maine Audubon has not engaged on these issues, we did in the 131st legislature, there was a bill to help that would have supported basically efforts to learn more about them, because there is a lot that we do not know about Maine's coyote population, including where they're seen and how many are hunted each year. And while Maine Audubon's lens is usually, we first take on an issue if it's having a population-wide impact on a species. So that's the first sort of target for us. But this is a complicated issue, and we get a lot of outreach, seeing it in the chat and beyond, about coyotes and how they're managed in Maine. And it's historically one of the most contentious wildlife management issues in Maine. all that being said, this session, there will be a couple bills that I'm aware of that relate to coyote management. And I think someone called out one in the chat. There is one to deal with sort of the tournaments associated with coyote hunting. And so Maine Audubon is going to take we've already sort of explored with agencies and looking at connecting with legislators who put legislation in to figure out what are the most logical steps forward and whether or not Maine Audubon's role is key in exploring this issue further. But it's very much on our minds, something we're exploring. And like I said, we engaged last session for the first time on coyote management issues. So we're in it, and stay tuned.
Thank you, Jess. If you've got other questions, please put them in the Q&A down below. Now's the time. A question here about is the federal freeze on funds affecting any of our work? Could it affect any of our legislative initiatives? We don't know. We are watching carefully to understand what is going on in terms of funding, both committed and potential. And that is an issue that we are actively sort of working to quantify and understand. We will see what the future holds. We work with a lot of federal agencies on implementing various initiatives. And so we are just waiting to see, like the rest of the world, how that will play out. So stay tuned for those questions. We will communicate with our members once we have a better sense of whether there are impacts and what those might be. And so we're watching along. That's the last question I've got here. Why don't we just go eat some lunch? How about that on Valentine, or some chocolate? I'm sure you've got some bonbons around. Treat yourself. Now's the time. I want to thank Chess and Anya for all your work, all your ongoing work. Happy Valentine's to you both today and for the months ahead. You're going to need to carry this love with you in your hearts for a while, because it's going to be tough. Thank you for all the work you do. Thank you to you all for joining. I recorded at the right time, so this will be up online later on. And thanks for coming out to see Maine Audubon, and happy Valentine's Day to you all.
Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Thank you all.
Bye.
And thanks, Nick.